Oh, excuse me. Does that bother you? If you don't know what I'm talking about, go watch the last video. There's a lot from this intro that pertains to the last video. First of all, the throat clearing. I do apologize. It's annoying. It happens when you work in a very dusty workshop. It's known as woodworker's cough. You can read about it. You can hear about it in all sorts of woodworking podcasts. Very common amongst men who work in a workshop. It goes away. It's not something permanent. You're just trying to clear your lungs of all those dust particles that you breathed in while you were sawing your wood. We had a little competition starting in the last video on the decibels of the box or the pump. And the decibels of the pump, we started out with 68 decibels with no sound proofing. Then it dropped to 63 decibels with the Rockwool. And then it dropped to, we'll find out here in a couple seconds, when I built the base part of the cabinet. So we'll find out what that is. I didn't realize the competition was going to be that close. People were putting in down to the decimal of a decibel. Did you win? Put down below if you won, and then I'll go check the comments from the previous video to verify, and then we'll have a prize. Maybe you will be the one that I send that 60 volt XRP DeWalt chainsaw to. Bet you wish you would have commented on the last video, huh? You didn't think it was going to escalate that quickly, but I've been holding on to that chainsaw for like 2 years and waiting for just the right moment and just the right person to give it to. Hope you enjoyed today's video. Make sure to subscribe, click the bell, check out today's video sponsor. That'll be linked down in the description. Also, Caulk Gun hats and shirts, and the very special mug that people have been asking for years. It's available. All the links will be in the description. So the shower is running at 56 decibels. It goes right about here. It was only 58. So right now it's like 1 decibel, 1.5 decibels louder than the shower. And to the ear, it's barely noticeable. It's just a light hum. I'm satisfied at its current state, but we will see improvements once we build the cabinet that goes around it. That was a way for you guys to hear it without the shower running. So right now I got to come up with a plan to build a cabinet. Going to come out here, obviously go across here. I want a little door that opens up. I don't think I'm going to make it a double door. It'll probably be a single door, and it'll clear the toilet, and you can stack all sorts of stuff in there. Now there will be cleats all the way around here that the countertop will be supported on. This front side here will also support it if you climb up on top of it, but it will be able to be slid out and away without the countertop falling off. There's 2 screws that hold this on, and there's 2 screws that hold this to the wall. Back to the workshop! I've got Sandy with me. This is one of the better sheets of plywood that you can get at Home Depot. Once in a while you'll find a little bit better selection, but you can always count on Sandy at the Home Depot. It's 3/4 inch, it's flat, it's straight, it's got pretty thick grain. Get an idea. Probably wouldn't be very good for painting. You would have to fill in all of that grain if you wanted to paint this. There is an imperfection down there. Won't even be able to use that section through it. That's filler. That's common in plywood. Real deep. I'll be using my DeWalt track saw to break this down. The first 2 pieces are only 14 inches by 33 inches. I've been using these foam pieces for years to keep my big sheets of plywood up off of the table saw so that I can cut them wherever I need to. Just toss them right underneath there and holds it up off the workbench. So I'm just going to give you a little rundown of what a track saw is. I'm fairly new to them. I've had it for a couple years. I've mostly always used my big table saw. But when you have a large 3/4 inch sheet of plywood, it is not easy to manhandle this thing through the table saw and get a good cut. So on unfinished plywood, You don't even need to use these clamps. Pretty much just a real fancy straight edge, this whole system here. So that goes in under there like that, and you can clamp it to the board. So if I have this overhanging, I've got another little stand that I use sometimes that when this board overhangs, there's room for this part of the clamp to hang down. But I don't use those as much anymore. I really only have to use these when I'm dealing with pre-finished plywood because it's so slippery. So this is the specific circular saw for the DeWalt track saw system. I'll leave links down in the description so you can kind of go look at them and see how much they cost. They are expensive. I've tried some of the cheaper options. They were just too much of a pain to work with. They weren't very accurate. They weren't fast to set up or easy to work with. So I just broke down and got this a couple years ago. Now you have to remember what side you're cutting on. I messed up a $140 sheet of plywood last week by not paying attention. I was on that side and I had the saw like this. Must not have gotten enough sleep that night. And I just start sawing. And I saw this off. I pull the track off and I see my marks, and that's when it hit me. I just ruined a very, very expensive piece of plywood. Make sure you're cutting on the right side of the track is the lesson there. I'm all lined up correctly. Got my foam pieces in place, and it's just real easy. I've got dust collection over here, but my remote control batteries are dead, so I'm just gonna let it go. A lot of sawdust comes out this port here. So I'll put my weight out here in the middle, and there's also the weight of the saw here, and I'll switch. Once the saw is weighting that end down, I'll slide my hand back this way. But just check my marks one last time. Real straight cut, hardly any tear out. The higher quality wood, the less tear out you'll get. One of the upgrades I need to make is the blade. I'm still using the original DeWalt blade that came with the saw. Now I am cutting these oversized. I will be making the final cuts through the table saw. I'm going to cut it a different direction this time. When you're cutting this way, you don't have to account for the blade thickness. You cut from that way. And you cut it like I did, you had to account for the blade thickness. So running a piece of wood that is wider than it is long, like this, is a big no-no. You're not supposed to do it. But on every construction site, we do it. Why? Because we got to get the job done, and we can't pay attention to the YouTube safety patrol. Well, if you were working with a smaller piece of wood and you were behind the saw, there's more danger. So when you're pushing this through here, the board can get racked in here and you can have kickback. I've got these little splitters here, so whenever I do this, and I do it all the time, or with a board that's wider than it is longer, first step is make sure you're waxed. So I have a slippery surface. I'm focused over here, also making sure I'm not going to run my hand through the saw. I'm focused on sliding this board up against the fence, just like that. See how slippery that is? But if you get a little out of control, if you get a little too much action over here, you can get this board to want to do this. You don't want that to happen. These splitters here help that, but only once the board gets there. Now on these new modern day sissy saws, I don't know if I can put that in there, they've got all sorts of safety features that pretty much do the same thing that this does, this little splitter here. If you've got an older table saw, I do suggest it. So this was a kit that I bought, and it didn't go well, but once I got it dialed in, I've run, I don't know, thousands of cuts through this. That's a zero clearance table saw insert for the Powermatic 66. This here, I can't remember who made this. I'll have to go through my Amazon and see where I got this. But this is a you know, it looks pretty flimsy, but this is stainless steel, super strong. They're slightly offset, one to this side of the blade, one to that side of the blade, just by a teensy weensy little bit. And that keeps the piece of wood from binding up on the saw. Now I got to cut a 22.5 degree bevel on the edge of this, and I can't use the zero clearance because I got to tilt this blade that way. So a tool that I need to get, digital angle finder. You zero your top, and then you transfer the magnetic angle finder to your blade so you can get the exact angle. But we're going to do it old school, I guess. I've tested this many times, so I know exactly where 22 degrees is. But I got to run this through here. Cut a 22 degree bevel on each of these. These are the outside legs. And then there's going to be, I guess you call it the face, that goes in front, parallel to the wall. That will also get 22 degree bevels on both edges, and it'll look just like that piece I've already built for it. So if you remember a few minutes ago I said that I cut these a little bit bigger, and this is one of the reasons. I got to cut this 22 degree bevel on this edge here, and I don't want to waste a whole bunch of time trying to get it to line up exactly on that edge. Well, when you cut it an inch long, all you got to do is line it up and run it through, and you can cut off 1/8 of an inch and not have to worry about getting it, you know, nickel and diming it to the very edge of that. So I'm just cruising along here, and I wanted to get the camera back on and not skip anything important. I hate when I'm watching videos and they skip parts and I'm like,
wait a minute, how'd you get there? I wanted to see that.
So this is the middle panel, and it's got 22 degree edges cut into it, and it fits right up with the two legs. Pretty straightforward so far. But right now I've got to cut out a square for the door access. I got to cut the toe kick out, so this is going to get the bottom 4 inches cut off of it. But before I do that, I want to get everything else done, because I like having them all the same length when I'm measuring and lining them up. And since I'm measuring off this beveled edge, you start measuring at the 1 inch mark instead of trying to hook this over a beveled edge. It just makes it more consistent when you start your measuring from the 1 inch line over. And if you're interested in any of these tools, they're all linked down in the description. And there is a Handyman Amazon store that has them all in one spot. So all these marks are on the back side. And depending on which method you use, you may want to cut from the front side, because you don't want tear out. So if I drill in each 4 of these corners, it's guaranteed that there's going to be tear out on the front side. I don't want that. I'll probably use the track saw, and I will cut straight on top of this foam here, and there will be no tear out on the front side. You're probably wondering, how the heck am I going to get this square out? Well, everything looks great so far on this side. No tear out, but I got to connect those lines. And what I'm going to use is the fine edge of my Japanese Suizan saw. I'm going to use the fine edge. This is a pull saw. So I still want the back side up, and I'm going to be pulling towards me, and we won't get any tear out. Keep in mind, we can tune all this up with a piece of sandpaper at the end. That cut perfect. Didn't go overboard, didn't go too far. This one here, I gotta tune that one up. Like I said, can easily tune this up with a little bit of sandpaper. So here is the cabinet face, I guess you would call it, the outer shell. Upside down, notched out for the toe kick, not glued together. That is the most challenging part of this, is to get these seams tight, perfectly tight, kind of like that. And it's not going to be an easy task. It's going to be a couple different steps. There is a very, very slight bow to this piece of plywood. It's an exaggerated angle. And in the middle, the gap opens up at the bottom and the top, nice and tight. So I've cut some boards that I am going to glue inside of here. How is this going to go? Like this. First I'll glue it to the face here, let it set up, and then I will have another clamping or gluing surface or a screwing surface to get it all tight. And it'll also just give that angle a little bit more to work with, because it's going to make a nice little V in there for this board to settle into. Gluebot, this thing is so valuable. I love this. Watch when I squeeze it, glue goes right on up, and you can put glue anywhere at any angle. I'm not going to use a lot. Of course, I put a little too much on there. Since this is a one-off creation, there's a chance that I have to break this apart. And you know, if you use Titebond 2, there is no breaking it apart, so I'll be probably rebuilding if I screw it up. I got to make sure this V here is tight. If it's a little too far back or a little too far forward, it all gets screwed up. It has to fit in there perfectly. No room for error. Check it, tap it, smack it, whatever I need to do. All right, we're all glued up. It is 9 o'clock at night, and I have to have the next video edited, uploaded for approval by 1 a.m. So I gotta go in, take a shower, and put my editing cap on. We gotta wait for this to glue up, and then hopefully I can just slide these two pieces into the V, glue it. Once you clamp this Titebond 2 and you got decent temperature, in about 5 minutes, it's stuck together. I've had wood clamped together for 1.5 minutes and realized, holy cow, that's clamped together wrong. And I go to pull it apart, and there's no pulling it apart. You literally tear the wood apart trying to get it apart. So that's how strong Titebond 2 is. I'll show you what it looks like. This is the glue, wood glue, premium wood glue, non-toxic, water cleanup, interior, exterior. It's just kind of my go-to glue that I use on everything. Some of you might be thinking, hey, why don't you just use the little tape and CA glue trick? And what that is you lay everything flat, or you put down some strips of tape, you lay all your boards flat, and then you put your glue down in the joints, and then you fold it up, and everything works out just perfect. When you're working on really good material that can work, and smaller material that can work, but when you got plywood that has just the slightest bow in it, that slight bow opens up a 30-second, heavy 30-second gap. You can't have that. I want it tight as possible so that I don't have to use a lot of filler. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.